Let's turn to the Middle East, where Israel is continuously being held to impossible standards in modern warfare. It's been revealed that the head of the World Health Organization was at Yemen's airport when it was hit with missiles overnight. It was the IDF's first ever attack on the airport in retaliation to Iran-backed rebels who fired missiles on central Israel in recent days that were intercepted. The WHO the chief of the WHO, said one of our plane's crew members was injured. At least 2 people were reported killed at the airport. He added, our heartfelt condolences to the families whose loved ones lost their lives in the attack. Let's bring in Strategic Analysis Australia Director Michael Shoebridge now. Michael, great to see you. Now, Israel has been fighting enemies on 3 fronts during this conflict, but it always comes under fire, so to speak, for responding.
Yes, well, Caroline, you're right. Israel has been fighting Hezbollah and Iran as well as Hamas, and so the Houthis have been a very low priority for Israel. But now that it's removed the main danger from Hezbollah and Iran, it can focus more energy on the Iranian-backed Houthis. And the Houthis have been sending drones and missiles into places like a children's playground in Tel Aviv. So I think this is just the start of a campaign by the Israelis against the Houthis. And I don't think they really think attacking critical infrastructure like airports and ports will do the job. I'd expect them to target the Houthi leadership and a whole lot of Houthi facilities and weapons.
Yes, and I imagine it will go much the same way as it has for the other terror groups across the region who've been attacking Israel, and not well, that is. Over to Central Asia, where an Azerbaijan Airlines plane carrying 67 passengers crashed in the Kazakh city of Aktau, killing at least 38 people on board. Now, videos have emerged detailing the crash and its aftermath, with many speculating that the plane had been downed by Russian air defense systems. Michael, what did you make of these speculations?
Well, Caroline, looking at the photos of the remaining chunks of the aircraft, like the tail section, and video from passengers inside the plane, it looks pretty clear that it was damaged by a surface-to-air missile. That's the kind of shrapnel damage you see on the plane and inside the plane before it crashed. Then the Russians diverted it over 400 kilometres from Grozny off into Kazakhstan, where it crashed. I think it crashed as a result of that surface-to-air missile attack. The Russians and the Chechens were under a lot of pressure to show they could protect Grozny from Ukrainian drones, and I think they've overreacted and been on a hair trigger with their air defence systems. And now we're seeing a whole lot of smoke and mirrors from the Russians about alternative theories about what happened. Everything but the truth.
It's not unlike what happened with that Malaysian Airlines flight, I guess, a few years ago either. Now, let's stay in Russia, where we learned this week of the Australian soldier captured by Russian troops while fighting for Ukraine in the Donbass region. It's been reported that the release of Oscar Jenkins could take years, as the Ukrainian ambassador to Australia warns negotiating with Moscow to release fighters is a difficult and lengthy process. Michael, do you think that we are actually likely to ever see Oscar Jenkins returning home?
Well, I would hope that we will, and I know the Australian government will continue to put every effort into that. But even the Red Cross hasn't had good access to prisoners of war in Russia during the Ukraine war. The Russian government, again, is failing to meet basic standards of things that it's signed up to, like the Geneva Convention. So I think our best hope looks like a prisoner swap between the Ukrainian government and the Russian government. And the Ukrainians have managed to do that because of Russians they've captured in their Kursk operation. So that's the best hope, but even that could be very extended.
Well, we will keep across that story and see what happens with Oscar Jenkins. Let's move to Syria now, where head of the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, General Mazloum Abdi, has warned that ISIS terrorists could attack Syrian cities over the New Year's, capitalising on the chaos and growing spectre of a second civil war since the end of Assad's regime. He said there is an increase in activity and a security vacuum. ISIS has obtained more weapons and capabilities and positions in the Syrian desert and have more freedom of movement. Michael, could this be really the return of ISIS?
Well, that's one of the nasty things that looks like it's starting to happen in Syria right now. That Kurdish group, the SDF, is really worth listening to. They've been a very good partner of international forces, including the Americans, in countering Islamic State, ISIS, so they're credible. But really, we're seeing Syria at the end of the post-Assad euphoria, and the nasty violence that people feared is starting to unfold. Former regime elements have killed 14 HTS, the new rulers, Interior Ministry people. There are curfews, there's a lot of violence. And the SDF, the Kurdish forces, are opposed by both the new ruling group, the HTS, and the Turkish-backed forces on the Turkish border. So the Kurds are central, but there's a whole bunch of ISIS fighters coming out of prisons and big camps.
It's not looking good. Michael Shoebridge, thank you so much for your time this evening. And that is it from me.